So today I will be showing you how to make Dijon ham and Swiss loaf. So we're going to turn all of this into this tasty, beautiful looking thing. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take your ham and your pickles and you're going to want to chop those up. And I just use shredded cheese because it's easier, but it's like pre-shredded. But if you have blocks of cheese and you prefer to do it that way, then you'll want to grate your cheese. This is just a much simpler way to do it. So you'll chop up all of that and then we'll move on to the dough. So this and this will become this. So the recipe calls for 1.5 cups of ham. I just use 1 regular sized canned ham and 1/2 cup of chopped pickles. So this for me was about 3 regular sized pickles. You can use a little bit less, a little bit more. It really depends on how much you like pickles. And then the recipe also calls for 1 cup shredded cheese. Okay, so I'm just gonna add my shredded cheese. And if you really like cheese, you can add a little bit of extra. I really like cheese. So I'm just gonna sort of give it a bit of a stir, and this will be our stuffing for the loaf when we've got the dough made. I'm just gonna put this in the fridge just to keep it nice while we do the dough. So that's the oven. Actually, I forgot to mention earlier that we want to preset your or preheat your oven to 375. Usually you can probably just start that once you start the dough to make that. Okay, so the recipe calls for 4 cups of all-purpose flour, but 1 cup of that is to set aside just sort of for extra if your dough is a little bit too sticky. I usually don't require a full cup of extra flour, so I will just measure out 3 cups. So the great thing about this recipe is that it's actually really easy to double, especially if you have a much bigger bowl than what I have here. So if you have a big family, it's really great because you can make sort of 2 loaves all at the same time. Or if you just sort of want lots for leftovers. And it's also great sort of reheated, or it's really good cold as well. So it's just a great kind of lunchtime easy thing to take. So that's what I used to, when we had a sort of more in the household, we'd usually do 2 loaves, so a double batch, because everybody loves it so much. So all right, so I have my 3 cups of flour, and so then we're going to put together our sugar, salt, and yeast. So we want 2 tablespoons of sugar. And then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then the recipe says 2 packages of rapid Rise yeast. So I've discovered that that's about 4.5 teaspoons of just this canned quick Rise yeast. So yeah, 4.5 teaspoons of that. Our other ingredients are, we need a cup of water and then a 1/4 cup of Dijon mustard. So I always buy the really grainy stuff just because it sort of makes it look better. The dough looks a lot nicer, just a little bit more interesting, I guess, if you buy the really... Going to get added together, and then it's going to be heated up just sort of to melt the butter and bring it to a little bit of a boil. All right, so I usually put it in the microwave for about a minute 15. Like I said, just mostly to get the butter melted. Okay, so I've got that heated up, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of a stir, make sure everything's kind of heated and melted. And then I'm going to add it to my dry ingredients. So give it a stir so everything gets mixed together, and then you want to make sure that your hands are clean because we're going to use our hands once everything's mixed together to knead the dough. So you're just gonna knead everything together because the dough will sort of start off a little bit dry and flaky, and so you're gonna want to knead it so that it all sticks together into one nice pile. And again, if it's really feels quite sticky, you can use a little bit of extra flour. So if you were doing a double batch, what you would do sort of at this point is split your dough into 2 piles and then knead them individually into their little rolls, so that you can sort of use each one to make your loaf. Okay, so that's what that will look like when it's done. So I just have my greased cookie sheet, and I usually just plop it down and roll it out right on the cookie sheet. And so I really like this small rolling pin because it works really well with this particular size and on the doing it on the cookie sheet as opposed to the counter. So if it's something that you can find, it works really handy for this recipe. And then you're going to roll it out pretty much as rectangular as you can, and mostly the extent of this pan. You don't want it too thin, but you do want it rolled out nicely to mostly to this whole size of the pan here. And like I said, as rectangular as you can. do, once we have our dough all rolled out, we're gonna grab our filling. And we're just going to put it in here all along as much the center as we can. Again, if you find that you have too much filling, what I usually do is just put it into a little casserole dish, maybe add a little extra cheese on top, and bake it for about the last 10 minutes of the loaf being in the oven. So I basically just, again, I kind of eyeball it into cutting it into strips here. I'd say they're about maybe about an inch, maybe not quite. Again, because I'm eyeballing it, some of them are probably a little bit bigger or smaller than others. And then I just try and, as much as possible, match it up on the other side. If you're a perfectionist, you maybe will do this in a much more exact way. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your sides and you're just going to basically fold them up onto each other. Hopefully you can see. I think you should be able to. So they will overlap on the top when you pull them up, which is good because then they'll sort of stick together and they'll bake together and it'll stay closed. I have had it, if they're not close enough together or you have too much stuffing, during baking it will kind of come apart a little bit. So again, you can be as sort of neat or as messy as you like with this step. It's gonna look pretty nice either way. So we have that all done. So the last step before you put it into the oven then would be, the recipe says use an egg to do sort of an egg wash on it so that it sort of goldens up and everything. I actually just use milk so that I'm not wasting an egg. So you can do whichever you prefer. So I just do a bit of a wash. And this will just sort of help it get nice and golden on top. If you don't have eggs or milk on hand for whatever reason, you can obviously do without. It'll be fine. So now this is ready to go and it goes into the oven for about 25 minutes depending on your oven, but I usually 25 has always been pretty good for any of the ones I've had. Okay, we'll see you in 25 minutes.